Welcome to the Hustling Podcast. Hustling is the leading marketplace for side gigs. Today, I'd like to welcome Dima Syrotkin, co-founder and CEO of Pandatron. I know I was a little bit off, Dima, but hopefully that was close enough.
Definitely. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. What is Pandatron?
So it's an interesting question. Well, they say start with why. So kind of starting with that, we're trying to make the world a bit more self-aware, emotionally mature, wise, kind of believing that that's really the most upstream problem we have. Like if you think of, ecology or, nuclear proliferation, everything, at the end of the day, it's all human-made decisions. And there are tools like therapy, coaching that could supposedly, there's a lot of data could help in those matters, right? Like the theory is that, the less traumas you carry from your childhood, the less likely you're probably going to be to start a war. And even though that's kind of a lofty vision, we also kind of grounding it into something very practical by making a methodology called business coaching or life coaching, very similar as well, more accessible. Typically, it would cost $250 per hour. We are making it 100 times cheaper by using AI and essentially having a chatbot that simulates a human coach, suddenly making it a lot more accessible. Currently, we mostly sell it to businesses, mostly big corporate clients. So think of Skanska, SAP, Universal Pictures. And for them, we tried initially selling it as kind of an HR solution, but we ended up pivoting more towards what we call change management. So when they're like changing something in the company and they realize that it's whether it's software or agile transformation where they kind of change the way company works, a lot of it is behavior, mindset, culture, and they realize that just training doesn't go far enough, and these are like billion-dollar projects. So essentially, in a nutshell, the product is an AI coach. Think of a chatbot that integrates into Microsoft Teams and Slack. And then for the clients, we are helping them with what's called corporate change management, with the hope that we will eventually be able to give access to this to everyone. And maybe as a last thing, we're already doing some of that. So currently planning a project with the Ministry of Education in Ukraine to support mental health of high school students, 3,000 high school students pro bono, to kind of follow up on the training that they go through.
It's very cool. And you already touched on it, but I'm going to ask you to just kind of rehash it again. I think you said that you talked about basically the value prop to the companies and then how the users use it via the Slack app. But could you give us just in one sentence an elevator pitch for Pandatron, just to rehash it for our listeners?
Yeah. So essentially, Pandatron helps clients like Skanska and SAP with large-scale corporate transformations. Think digital transformation, agile, cultural transformations, by supporting thousands of their employees with what we call an AI coaching, which essentially is a chatbot that integrates into Microsoft Teams or Slack and supports people with the whole spectrum of soft skills, anything from leadership, time management, understanding why change is happening, what their role is, prioritization, goal setting, work-life balance, you name it.
So I laugh. This cracks me up. So a couple years back, I had a startup in the employee engagement space. The company's name was Eventer. Our product suite was called Hapster. And we ended up building a mobile app, a web app, and then we ended up going into Slack because in 2016-17, Microsoft Teams was just beginning and Slack was really taking off. And we saw a ton of traction through that. But it cracks me up the most when you said we started out selling into HR and now we've moved towards some of these other teams. And from our very first interview, in the Hustling podcast interview, we started interviewing a company called Vet.io, and they're kind of in that HR space. And that space can be very hard to sell into. It likes safety, it likes things kind of procedure as it is, not so open to change. So I totally get kind of the switch there if that's why you guys made that change. Yep. One other thing that's on my mind that I had a question on Dima is I'm a huge fan of chatbots. I've stood them up at a bunch of companies that I was at through 2020 and 2021 because I saw this hiring spike, and I knew that we were going to have to like eventually lay people off if we were going to hire too many people for customer service. So I've been a huge proponent in chatbots for way before the AI and chat GPT like revolution. But can you help me and our listeners understand how you guys take a human approach, right? Because like obviously these conversations that you're talking about, they really require a level of a really strong human component when you're doing things like even an agile transformation, but certainly company culture and those kind of things. How do you guys try to keep it human, or as I joke around, I call it organic intelligence? How do you guys bake that into the experience for the end user?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like, how do you, improve the product? What kind of data do you use? And for us, we have a bit of a history. So we started 3 years ago with human-led coaches doing coaching via chat. Because at the time, I didn't believe in chatbots. I was like, this is never going to work. And therefore, like, but we still want to try to make coaching cheaper. So let's just use people who would do it via chat, like, via Teams or Slack, but just that they would type things, because then there's less of emotional toll. And through that, we got a bunch of data. So that like taught us how this works in via text, like in this a bit different medium, what works, what doesn't, gave us a bit of data to kind of like potentially train upon. Then the other part, of course, is employing experts. So we employ, like one of our co-founders is a social psychologist. Another one is a coach, philosopher, future studies scholar. So kind of getting those perspectives. One of our employees is like internal family systems expert. So it's a kind of a branch of therapy. We're also quite familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy. So those people, first of all, they kind of craft the content and the structure behind the tool. And then more importantly, they also look at like, what works, what doesn't, where could we correct things. So I think that's like a big piece of what makes this work and what makes us human. And then of course you also have like user feedback and user data. So like the scale here is super important. And we're probably one of the first companies in the world now to like scale to, scale of like thousands of people. And that kind of gives you the advantage of like constantly improving through that.
So yeah, it sounds like you guys still have a lot of people, it sounds like, that are still involved at Pandatron that are like constantly iterating the messaging and the format, and it's like the model keeps growing, probably from an AI standpoint and also from a human standpoint, so it's never the same thing over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely like at least right now it's a huge like improvement day after day. Yeah.
Cool. And that very much represents, I think, the human experience. So I think that's pretty awesome. Well, with that, obviously our listener base is a large number of people that are, they're side hustle workers, contractors, and, we have people from product designers, marketing professionals, all kinds of people, all kinds of backgrounds. So what projects is Pandatron currently working on where you guys could leverage our network of listeners?
I think the most obvious one, and like really, the first by a big margin, is going to be connected to like sales and marketing, whether it is lead generation or actual like sales generation. The reason is we're still so we're currently at the stage where we see kind of different things working, and we are kind of enjoying the revenue we're getting from there and trying a little bit to kind of find our focus. Like our top client, Skanska, is in construction. So we're like, okay, should we go into construction at the same time? The industry is going through recession. And then we see that, for example, going through partners is seemingly super successful. So some of our like biggest clients are coming through partner companies. So that can be like consulting firms like BCG and Capgemini, can be coaching firms, can be also very like, one-person companies. So essentially, let's say like the reseller partner is kind of like one of the most obvious things that we already see working for us. So for example, if you have especially if you work with these topics, if you're a consultant who works with corporate clients around, corporate change management, this is super kind of easy because we can help you improve your offering, and help you kind of get extra revenue from there. So that's number one. We are also happy, like, even if it's not something like you do on a constant basis, but let's say, there's a bunch of people who are doing just like either sales work or lead generation work. We are at this point happy to pay like on a kind of meeting booked basis for the profiles that we're looking for. We're mostly looking though for like quite high up people, which is like typically like executives, or maybe people related to change management, like director of digital transformation or chief transformation officer, etc. So these are the first things that come to mind. Yeah.
Cool. So folks that are listening that are well networked in that world, and there's a lot of things you kind of touched on. So people that maybe there's one-off basis where they might have a couple of connections where they're in digital transformation. They've been doing that for a long time and they know of a couple of companies. There's even the reseller space, which you touched on, which is like CDW, SHI, like those big, massive software resellers where maybe you have a bunch of accounts that are going through this digital transformation and you could, they could reach out and work with you guys. And then you have people that are sales and marketing and lead gen experts that know the space and are passionate about it. And maybe there's a long-term play for them to start out at Panditron in a small capacity and then grow their role or something like that. So that's excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would also say that, like, what we're doing. So if you think of it, the people we employ are either in sales and marketing or in kind of like psychology related fields like coaches, therapists, or developers, whether that's AI or typically backend. Like our front end is pretty thin because we integrate into Microsoft Teams and Slack, so we don't like have a lot of our own front end. We have a bit, but not that much. So generally, of course, if you're looking for a job, feel free to just like send an open application. We have on our website like an email. We're not hiring right now super actively, but currently growing. So I think like as early as like in 30 days, the situation could be different, where we could have like a couple of like active roles. So if you send it to us right now, then we can come back if there's something open.
Excellent. But at least right now there is a need for sales and marketing people, and they can start out small contract side gig and then kind of expand that into something larger. So that's
exactly
that's a good starting point, which brings me to my next question, which is looking through your LinkedIn, I noticed that Panda is a theme. So I want to understand why Panda is a theme. And then also, how did you land on Panditron? Like, why this specific mission? How did this become a passion of yours?
Yeah, I think that's also like in your question, there's also a bit of an answer. So the reason why there's kind of a theme of Panda related companies is because they kind of started with a similar mission. And so the product changed and we kind of pivoted, but the mission essentially stayed the same. And so in my past career, I sold one company that was related to coaching. So there was like a little exit there. And then there was one where let's say we decided to just like change the product, but essentially the core team stayed the same. And the mission comes from me going to so-called leadership development conferences, but they were really more about personal development, kind of figuring out who you are, as much like as lofty as it sounds, but on a very practical level, like what are you afraid of? What are your dreams? What are you passionate about? And the way they've done that was not, there's some of this kind of like quote unquote coaching, which I frankly am not a fan of, like kind of the Tony Robbins stuff of like, let's just focus on your mindset and like everything else will come, kind of like what is this, like manifestation and things like that. So that's not really what I'm talking about. The way they've approached it is more from a perspective of like reflection. So it's really more like Plato, kind of know thyself, and like just so they would throw a bunch of questions at you, right? Like and like create a setting where you can actually reflect on those. They would do a lot of simulations. So they would kind of stage games. Some of you might have heard of Prisoner's Dilemma. If you haven't, Google it. Very interesting stuff. So they would like stage that in real life, and then you would notice that the way you behaved in the game is actually how you often behave in real life. And then afterwards, they would kind of follow up with reflection on that, and you would be like, "Wow, like, am I really like behaving like this in day to day?" And it again opens a lot of insight there. And then they would create those like small groups where you can share things, which is also what we try to do in our product. Where on one hand, it is one-on-one AI coaching, but we also try to connect people in what we call communities of practice, where they can like share that, hey, I'm having this goal or I had this insight. And so that kind of just to me showed that like, wow, there's a lot of potential here, but I think we're not really seeing it as a culture, because on one hand, it's hard to measure, and like the return on investment is not clear. And we also have a lot of tools that either don't work or have a lot of like charlatans. But I still think like if you do this right, I think there's a lot of potential. And as I was mentioning in the beginning, that like it is a fundamental issue in a way. Like I think like Nelson Mandela said that like education is the most powerful tool to impact the world. And that's my view as well. Although I kind of see education not just the education of skills, because skills are kind of making you more powerful so you can like do more things. But I think education should also include this part where you understand yourself, so you kind of think about what's the right thing to do, besides just being more powerful, but also like what's actually the ethical thing to do. Of course, it's like they go hand in hand, but yeah.
Yeah, it makes me actually laugh because you mentioned Tony Robbins, and I was actually listening to him yesterday. He interviewed Mickey Singer, which I don't know if you know him, but he's like a Buddhist guy. And he talks about this whole fundamental principle of like throughout our lives, we basically pick up garbage through these negative experiences.
Yeah.
And it's like whether someone cuts you off when you're driving or someone's slowing you down or all these things that trigger you. And it's about being aware of yourself and these triggers and figuring out how to let them go. And a lot of what you touched on kind of hits that for me. And I'm like, it's a very real thing for people at work and at home. I think the one thing that's super important is, and I'm sure you guys have really great clients like SAP that you're working with, and people now are starting to see how important mindset is, but people have to be all in. Like people definitely have to be dedicated to it, because a lot of times it's a lifestyle change, like changing your thought process or eating the right foods or whatever. It's like, it's not just like, oh, we go to a retreat, now everyone's good. It really requires that desire to change. And so I think what you guys are doing is so cool.
Yeah, and I would add, it's not only mindset. So that's like, I mean, I think Tony Robbins probably has a lot of impact, but I think like when it's just mindset, I think there's also like a big behavioral part of it, which is like habits and sort of like reflection. And I think like you can only believe in yourself so much. Like at some point you start kind of questioning if you're just like lying to yourself. And I think that's like positive affirmations and like looking at yourself in the mirror and like being like, I'm great. I mean, it's maybe nice, but I think you're more successful at building confidence, for example, by like going out into the world, doing something small and succeeding. And then you like have the evidence of like, damn, like, yeah, this is so, I know that I'm running into a risk of like antagonizing half the people listening to this, but
no, I don't think so. For me, I'm very much mindset, but I think it kind of crosses over because Tony Robbins and Ed Milet and all these people, Tom Bilyeu, they all kind of say very similar things. It kind of where they might start with mindset, but it's like just like a piece of uranium has all this potential energy. It doesn't mean anything if it's not leveraged correctly, and you can't sit on your butt, watch TV, and eat potato chips and expect to change the world. You have to have the mindset that you can. You can't start out like, I'm a piece of garbage, I'm worthless. Like that needs to go away. But then you've got to do something with it. And so I very much understand what you're saying. And I hope that the audience is inspired by it. I think you guys, Panditron has a very inspiring mission. And people that can follow this model and people that can embrace change in the way that you guys, I think, are trying to bring it along are going to be happier moms and dads, brothers, sisters, wives. So I think it's a fantastic thing. I think the mission's incredible, and I'm glad that you guys exist. So I hope any of our listeners that are here that are in sales and marketing, or maybe you're someone that's just really passionate about, working with a company like Pandatron, doing incredible things. stay posted in the future, but we will be creating a page for Pandatron on Hustling, and we will be putting a job rec out for some of those sales and marketing side hustles. So Dima, it's been really awesome to speak with you and to learn more about Pandatron, and I'm just so grateful to have this time with you.
Likewise, thanks a lot. This was very insightful. And as a last word, if if you're one of the top people in AI in the world, also don't be shy. Feel free to reach out.
One thing I should mention, where can people find you? I know obviously there's a Pandatron website, so share that with our listeners. And then if you guys have your own YouTube channel or a podcast, share that too.
Yeah, I think so. I've done actually a bunch of podcasts that you probably have a better lack of searching just by my name, and then on our website you have a bit of a blog as well. And I guess the best way to find me personally is on LinkedIn. Difficult to spell name, but you probably will have it in the show notes. So just put that in LinkedIn and you'll find me. And then our website is pandatron.ai. So hopefully should be easy enough.
Awesome. Dima, thanks so much.
Likewise.